Ms. Taylor, let's start with you since you filed the motion.
Do you want me just to sort of give an opening type statement?
That would be great.
Okay. So I originally was contacted by, I guess, Mr. Hightower regarding this affidavit of election situation with Henry and Ansley. I, have had a lot of court and, other things. And so I was they were about to go into spring break. And so I kept thinking, oh, I'll go down to their school, but didn't have a chance to get down there because I like to do that and see them on a neutral, territory, just because it makes everyone feel better. But I couldn't accomplish it. And so then when
let me ask, the allegation
is
allegation is that they were forced into the election. Is that what I'm?
Force is a word, as a former prosecutor, force has many, meanings, but so yes, sort of, and, when I say confined, not falsely imprisoned, I mean, I think if they had fought their way out, they could have gotten out, but, sort of kept in a room and, that Kelly hosted and would not allow them to go until they, essentially until they caved and signed. And, if they had not caved, would they have remained in the room? Possibly. I think that they were allowed to speak to each other and then, but, she's the parent. They wanted to go to their friends, the activities that they had, and she was not allowing it until they, complied.
Okay.
And then, so they did and just, said, well, we'll sign it, doesn't, Ansley and Henry both said, we did it to get out of the room. And it basically, was, we want 50-50. You may or may not know that there are two previous affidavits in this case signed by the children that Mr. Hightower submitted. And independent of those, I have communicated with them on multiple occasions about their desires, at which we've been pending for 3 years. So I've spoken to them over the years several times, and they don't want 50-50. So that wasn't their desire. That was pre-written, and they were made to sign. So that is. Was concerning, it was concerning to me. It's Henry is a child who has, of the 3 children, Bradley is now 18, about to graduate and go to college. He was 15 when I met him. Henry was the one who would give me, who shared with me the least. He was the child, as I've been with these children, who always was the most neutral, had the least issues from a parenting perspective, objectively, you know what I mean? Like just, Bradley is on the spectrum and has some things, but Henry and Ansley had their own things from the beginning. And Henry's just always been an easier child, I think, for everyone to parent, and also just more compliant and that kind of thing. And he was very neutral. And just never has given me much, opinions, except to state his opinion. He doesn't elaborate. So when I met with him in my office separately from everyone, he put his head in his hands and he said he gets headaches. It's getting to be too much. He thinks he's just been pushing it down and he just can't do that anymore. He's coming home. Mr. Lee wasn't present in the home. They've been separated physically, and mom is kind of, guilting him into come watch a movie with me. And I think sharing information that he doesn't need to be part of. Not, mental abuse information, but just leaning on him as an emotional resource to fill up her emotional needs. And he's overwhelmed.
What did he say anything in particular about the affidavit?
Yeah, he said the children were both very consistent. I believe Ansley, I don't take notes with them because I just think it makes them uncomfortable. But I think Ansley had to be picked up, and the conversation started with her in the car. And then Henry was there and wanted to go, and he was the first in the room, and then Ansley. And so that's how I think that went. But I didn't, they converged at the house together. And then
But they each child separately said to you that they felt forced,
did not want to sign it,
okay,
not allowed to leave. And Wendy Fritz, so when Neil alerted me, Wendy Fritz, who is Ansley's counselor of some time, who, I stay in, communication with, has, because of some of Ansley's issues, texted me or emailed me and said, Ansley needs you to come see her. And so on that day, and so Ansley had shared with Wendy the same conversation. I spoke to Wendy again this morning, shared the same thing she had told me.
which was the being forced
about the affidavit and being kept in the room and not allowed to leave. And they were in session, and Wendy said, Ansley wants you to come see her. So then I called Neil, and he had him there the next day to my office.
To the therapist or to your office? Okay.
No. So okay. Ansley was in the therapist's office
when she said it. Okay.
And so Ms. Fritz heard it first, right, from Ansley. She said, Ansley wants you to come see her. And then I asked Neil to come bring them because they were on spring break, so they could come the next day. And so, yeah, they were, these children aren't easily traumatized because of what they've, I think, experienced in their lives. But Henry was really the one I was most concerned about in my meeting. I met with them separately. And with Henry, he looks defeated. He looked exhausted.
How old is he?
Henry is 16.
Okay.
I believe.
All right.
And he asked me for a counselor. He said, I think it would help me to see somebody. I said, I agree. I said, I'll get recommendations out. I asked Ms. Fritz for recommendations, and within the practice she's in, I sent some ones that I refer people to, both in my, practice as a, just, yes. And men, he wanted a man. Bradley has had a counselor, Dr. Scott Davis, who I think is great for Bradley. I think.
How old is Bradley?
18. He's about to
graduate. Right. Okay.
And I think that he, I think he needs a separate counselor. I just think that every counselor needs to start fresh with these folks, both with the parents and the children, given the more in my opinion, the more eyes on it, the better. And that's why I think it's important to Henry to have a different counselor than his brother.
Understood. And what are you recommending as a result of this that I do?
I am asking for you to suspend the visitation with mom pending her forensic psychological evaluation, and that she comply with all treatment recommended. And as soon as she gets it, we can phase back in, because I just think that, and I have feared for a long time that as we approach, hopefully, the end of this litigation, I do believe that she is, I would use the word aggressively getting more defiant of the court orders. She has stopped taking Ansley to counseling. She doesn't pay for counseling despite the court order because she doesn't like that Ms. Fritz, has, I believe, accurately assessed the situation, which means that Ms. Fritz sees to some degree what I see with Kelly and has independently seen that. Not to say that Neil doesn't have issues, and I've never said that. I've testified, under oath that he has his own issues, but the issues that are affecting the best interest of the children in a way that I think requires the court's intervention is what Miss Lee is doing. So she's stopped paying for Bradley's, Mr. Hightower is paying, that's why they're going. Ms. Lee likes Dr. Davis. She believes that he aligns with her feeling that children should not be allowed to select and elect, and give an opinion on time with each parent. Dr. Davis does adamantly feel that way. And so that is why Kelly, likes that and wants him. Fine, perfectly fine, but she's also not paying him. So, the children are in counseling because Neil is paying, which I'm very, glad for the children about. But the court order says she's got to pay. And, she's recently gotten the nurse practitioner for the pediatrician to sign not even sign, I think it's just a letter written where she's weighing in on there should be a second opinion with Ansley because Kelly doesn't want Wendy Fritz to continue and has done everything she could to try to get her off, as she's doing with me, where she's, this motion is saying I'm acting in bad faith and I have unclean hands. This is Miss Lee's MO. I mean, that's how she tries to get people out of her case when they don't agree with what she wants. Dr. Levitt has resigned. She will not continue. My understanding, and I have not, Neil will have to tell you this, but I understand that there was a withholding of Bradley's medication. I don't have firsthand knowledge of that at this point. Miss Lee was not giving the medication because Bradley wouldn't come see her.
Ms. Yountville, you'll get a chance to respond, I promise. All right, go ahead.
My main concern has been, because there's in this case, more than any other I have seen, there is always something. But until this, I have always thought that these children have survived in this highly contested custodial situation, well, with the exception of Ansley, relatively well. And Henry was sort of always my marker for that, because Bradley is on the spectrum. Bradley, has some more challenges to deal with things.
But he's also aged out.
But 3 years, I've been
sure.
Yeah. And so that, that's my point, is only that, Henry was always okay. And when Henry came, he was not okay. And, he could have had 3 counseling sessions by now, but you know what? He's not, Miss Lee doesn't want these other neutral counselors. She wants to go to Dr. Davis, which I specifically asked not to happen because it's just not appropriate in this case or in their best interest. And Henry asked me for a separate counselor. He didn't want to go to his brother's counselor.
And Davis is who Bradley sees.
Right.
Okay.
But she won't do it, and it hadn't happened because she has final decision over medical, which is what I'm asking you to change as well, to allow Mr. Hightower to set up the counselor. And I've told Henry, and Henry will do this, and everybody knows it. I said, Henry, you're going to have to maybe go to 2 or 3 to get a connection. Same with Ansley. Ansley had to do the same thing. And if you connect, it will help you, but you may not like the first one. You may dislike the first or second one. And he said, I understand. And we've given him options. I mean, I've given options. And Henry understands that. But he's not getting it.
16, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mom is mouthing that he's 15.
Okay. Well, I can look. I haven't.
He's 15 and a half. So, I mean, I think it's
All right.
fair to say that he's almost 16.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's as we've stopped using full DOBs, I've kind of stopped looking as much because you can't use that. But yes.
Okay.
Even though I do have his.
Understood. Okay. Anything else?
No,
No,
not for me.
all right.
So again, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Judge, I wanted to make
Okay.
clear, I do want for a temporary basis for Mr. Hightower to take over the counseling.
Well, if he would have final decision-making authority on medical, that would come with that.
Of course, and that's great. I just think my point is the rest of it, I'm okay with. It would just be the psychological if you wanted to piece that out.
Okay. Is there, refresh my memory, has she already been ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay. All right.
And I will tell you, I am aware, and they're right. I did try to call Kelly's psychologist a while back, and I just haven't spoken to her. She has never been engaged in a forensic way. In other words,
Right.
yeah. And so I haven't seen a huge value in doing that, because to me, this case cries out for, and I have repeatedly asked mom and her attorney for her to agree to a full forensic psychological. And I even, said we would, maybe even have some things where Mr. Hightower doesn't get it, because I think he would use it against her in the litigation. But she has not agreed, and I haven't, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me hear from the attorneys. Ms. Shoemaker, do you want to add anything to what the guardian has already stated?
The only thing I would add to what the guardian said, and my client can testify to this, but sometime in mid-April, Miss Lee received the new anti-seizure medication for Bradley. And my client asked, to get it from her on April 14th, on April 19th, April 20th, and she refused to give it to Dad, insisting that Bradley had to come to her house and have a conversation with her before she would give it over. Now, it's my understanding that this week, after the guardian filed her motion, Mom did give the medication to Dad. So that's also concerning for us. That again, it's really manipulation against the children, and we think it's very detrimental to the children.
If that is true, I would agree. So, all right. Anything else, Ms. Shoemaker? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Yoxel?
Thank you, Judge. Okay, I'm going to start backwards. So with what Ms. Shoemaker said. Okay, so Bradley has epilepsy. He's on Keppra. I have complained to the guardian multiple times that Bradley is not taking that medicine at Dad's house. There is a new tablet, exactly the same dosage, except it's an extra lot. They call it extended release.
Yeah.
It's taking it twice a day. And random comment, but I have a dog that suffers from seizures, and so I'm very well familiar with Keppra. My sister died of cancer that went to her brain. Very well familiar with Keppra. So she wasn't withholding anything that Mr. Hightower didn't have. The only reason why she suggested that Bradley come to her home is because my client is a LRN. She's a nurse, and she wanted to make sure he understood the medication, considering the fact that there's been a history of him not taking it at Dad's. So that's that. This is, what I like to call smoke and mirrors, and trying to paint a horrible picture of something that's not necessarily correct. So, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to move backwards. The idea of, now I appreciate Ms. Taylor admitting that she has not talked to the professionals that my client sees, but my clients had to sign more than one waiver because of the time lapse, of Ms. Taylor not speaking to them. I have asked Ms. Taylor repeatedly to speak to these people, emails, calls, but to no avail. Now, let's talk about this affidavit of election. If you look at the timeline, Your Honor, and I'm just kind of run this by you, because there was spring break. There was also the fact that the parties do share week on, week off. The affidavits were signed March 25th. The evidence is going to show, and it's in my motion, that there were tons of communication between the children during this time period. Nobody was held in a room for 2 hours. And Ms. Taylor even admits that my client spoke to them individually and together. And even if we were to say she forced them to sign this, it's not even valid per OCGA with respect, 1993, with respect to affidavits because Mr. Hightower not only filed one, but two. And nothing in there said anything bad about dad, that he's a piece of crap. All it said was 50-50. And that actually isn't harmful to Mr. Hightower. That's just saying, like, let's just continue this, but fix whatever these problems are between us.
All right,
But-
hold on 1 second. I have a question. You said the affidavits aren't the ones that were signed March 25th are not valid?
Technically, they're not, I can't submit them to the court for evidence in the sense that because there was other affidavits filed, you're not allowed to file more than one affidavit every 2 years in a case. And this case has been pending 3 years. There's actually 2 affidavits filed by Mr. Hightower.
When were dad's filed?
They were signed in December 2021, right before Christmas, but they were not filed until January 2022. And then the other ones were filed with the other ones were filed with the original answer and counterclaim filed by Mr. Hightower's first attorney as well. And that would have been, I think, September 2020 or August 2020. So we're okay. So, but we're irrespective of that. The kids were with Mr. Hightower from March 27th. So that this affidavit hostage situation takes place March 25th. The kids are with Mr. Hightower March 27th to April 12th. I haven't heard anything about these affidavits or any issues, or then the kids are back with my client April 12th through April 24th. During those time periods, I'd like the court to take notice of this. Miss Ansley, the daughter, the youngest, who has probably the most issues, went to see Wendy. That's this counselor, right? Wendy on March 29th, April 19th, April 26th. I guess I'm just calling into question the motive and how, the outcry was first by Mr. Hightower, who benefits from this outcry, who benefits from perhaps twisting the story as if, oh, you were forced and stuck in a room. I submitted my response, Your Honor, which does have text messages. It helps with the timeline of the kids. They were going out. Mom was taking all these boys to Waffle House the next day. There was nothing in there that sounded like that mom is holding them hostage. The other thing I'd like to say is that we're here on an emergency motion, and I hate to say the same argument as last time, but this is not an emergency. This is a unfortunately typical, and Your Honor, you know this. This is a high conflict case that has been high conflict for over 10 years. These parties cannot get along. And to be fair, both of them are unreasonable. I've spent hours reading their Our Family Wizard. I have, 10-page dissertations from Mr. Hightower, not agreeing to basic stuff. I've got 10-page or dissertation from my client, not agreeing to reasonable stuff. And that's where we are with this. These are two people that just can't get along and can't put the children first. Miss Taylor says that the children were so distressed. I have more text messages. I have witnesses to say they went on vacations together. They did all these other things, but I mean, how can they be so distressed from this if they're doing all these activities and talking to their mom and telling them they want to go see Heather's at the high school that's being performed and going to football games and lacrosse games together? FYI, because Miss Taylor has not followed up with other items I asked her to follow up with, my client is not separated from her husband. We are all familiar with what happened in February, which is an unfortunate situation.
Refresh my memory as to what happened. Because
he was arrested. Okay. Bradley was in the house.
Who was arrested? Wait a minute. Who was arrested?
So my client was arrested.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
Between, I don't know, stepdaughter / dad, police came. They
yeah. That's what sparked the other hearing.
Correct. And
I remember.
But I submitted to the court through my response to the motion that my client's been exonerated. It's been expunged from her record. She's back with her husband. They're in counseling. Not that really matters today, but they're working on whatever issues were going on there. And so they are together. So mom is not relying on any of the children for emotional support. And even if she did, is this an emergency? Is this a reason to suspend visitation? Again, this is so extreme. When I complained that Mr. Hightower wasn't giving the medicine, or the fact that he has not encouraged Bradley once to reach out to mom. And when they were at a recent graduation event or high school event, Bradley completely ignored his mother, and dad didn't say a damn word, part of my language. So, I mean, that to me is atrocious and in front of the other children. With respect to Dr. Davis, this man has been in practice for 20 years. He has a PsyD, which is equivalent, PhD. And if Henry doesn't like going to him, then he can go somewhere else. And also Bradley's aged out. So I'm sorry, I have like kids and tennis people texting me. I apologize. Another thing I would say is that Bradley is aged out. He's not going to Dr. Davis anymore. So it's not like the two of them are going to be sitting there together, kibitzing about what's going on there.
But wait a minute. The oldest child is not getting any counseling now?
I believe he's almost done with it.
No, I mean, I haven't checked in with Dr. Davis. When I spoke to Bradley, he asked me he was going every week. He asked me for every 2 weeks. But of course, I can't accomplish that, right? If mom won't agree with anything that I say. So I just don't, I mean, that's what Bradley wants. I can't help him. So I don't know what is happening right now, but I'm telling you.
Does mom take him to Dr. Davis?
She does. And what I will say is Dr. Davis is paid up. So that was an incorrect statement by Ms. Taylor. He has been paid up.
When did that just happen recently?
I believe last week. Yeah.
After this motion was filed, perhaps?
Not to my understanding. I believe it was the 20th. He was paid up, but I can pull the receipt, Your Honor, if you want to see that, if that's really important today. But the other thing that I would like to say is that my client is very well educated. She is always made the medical decisions and spotted issues with these children. I mean, I've complained to the guardian when one of the children, when Ansley came back with this disgusting rash all over her, we sent pictures to her, but that wasn't a big deal to the guardian. That dad didn't take her to the doctor. Dad doesn't take her to the doctor. And now all of a sudden this year he's interested in that. But that's fine, better late than never. But my client simply asked for a second opinion because in her opinion, as a nurse and the mother of this child, she's not improving under the care of this woman. This is a child that shoplifts, that cuts herself, that since a very early age of 8 or 9 sent sexual pictures to people online and through Roblox and still continues to send sexual pictures to her boyfriend. And mom continuously gets calls that, hey, just want to let you know your daughter sent something again, or she's using Snapchat and it got deleted, it gets deleted. So you can't really track it on the phone if you're trying to track. To me, those are very serious issues. And I feel like, and look, I've worked with Ms. Taylor before. I think she's a great person. So I'm not here trying to attack her, but I feel that it's reached a point where Kelly can do no right and Neil can do no wrong. And I'm sorry to call them by their first names. We live in the same neighborhood and our kids go to school together. But either way, Your Honor, the bottom line is I don't think that this is fair. I don't think this is an emergency. If the court's inclined to order a psychological evaluation of my client, I would ask that it be done of both parties. But what I will say is that I don't think that Ms. Taylor is requesting this in good faith when she hasn't even spoken to the health professionals dealing with Miss Lee at this point. I just think that this is her opinion as a lay person, only as a lawyer. And I hate to say it, I can't make opinions on medical things either. I don't have that background, but I don't believe that she's done the sufficient legwork to do so. And the letter that I submitted in my motion also, Your Honor, is from the pediatricians that's been seeing these children since they were born. And if they think that it's okay to have a second opinion, what is the big deal? I mean, why is Mr. Hightower afraid of a second opinion? Is it going to come back that something horrible is coming on? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And the person that Wendy that Miss Taylor says that, oh, Ansley loves Wendy and Mr. Hightower loves Wendy. This is someone that's not even fully licensed and that is under the supervision of someone else. So why not go to someone more experienced that's more well-versed in A, self-harm, B, shoplifting and lying. And we all know that shoplifting is not necessarily about needing to steal something. There's a mental psychosis behind that. And also, dealing with this whole, sending the new pictures, this overly sexualized behavior that's been going on for years and not getting resolved. And now, and the latest, which I know Ms. Taylor disputes and Mr. Hightower, but Ansley has dropped a significant amount of weight. She's still technically safe on the BMI chart at the pediatrician, but she's still being monitored. She doesn't do any sort of activities that would warrant such a drop in weight. For instance, my daughter does about 20 hours a week of gymnastics. She plays soccer and she does jujitsu and never sits still. So for her, yeah, she is a stick figure. But when you do an hour or two ballet and no other activities, it doesn't warrant to me how you're dropping a tremendous amount of weight at that age. And so I don't think that that's an unreasonable question or investigation, and it's still ongoing. So I think that my position is that when I present these issues, and I think I present them rationally and I try not to be argumentative, like I said, get along with Dawn. I think she's great. But in this particular situation, I feel like, she's shut off and just not listening to what I'm saying and not willing to investigate what I've mentioned. And I think this motion shows that, this is not an emergency. Is it perhaps maybe bad judgment by mom, if it is at all, if this is even true that this was coerced? But at the end of the day, even if it's not valid, number one, and number two, these children love their mother. And I've got the text messages and I've got witnesses to tell the court about it. But to suspend visitation at the end of the year when they have activities, when they have, there's so many events that my client has planned. For instance, being in charge of the booster club for the football team for Henry, for her not to be able to go to these events, Mother's Day coming up. Bradley's graduating from high school, and although she attempted to communicate with Mr. Hightower about it, she's excluded from attending anything. How is that okay?
What do you mean she's excluded from attending?
Because Mr. Hightower is not going to allow her to attend
Bradley's graduation?
And that it's up to Bradley if Bradley's to see mom or do anything. So I think if my client did that, if roles were reversed, there'd be about 50 motions filed. What a horrible parent she is and how she's alienating and keeping the children from them. I just think this is a woman that raised this child from birth. And it's just, it's really sad. This is a very sad situation. And I think that's why this just needs to get resolved, but not in an emergency hearing to strip anything left that my client has.
Your Honor, may
Taylor?
I respond? Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you. Wow, that was basically 3 years. So I think most of that is irrelevant. I have a lot to say about a lot of that. Ms. Yaxall is a great witness for Ms. Lee, but she's not a witness, and she has not individually spoken to those people. I've spoken to Dr. Rodbell's office about Ansley's issues. And they have been very clear that they're watching her and she is fine. Ms. Lee wants to create issues because that gets her control. And this is her MO. Dr. Levitt will not continue because
Dr. Levitt won't continue with
parenting coordination. We asked her and it was consented that she would do parenting coordination. She's called me on multiple occasions and she has been exasperated with Miss Lee because Miss Lee will not follow any instructions. She will not stop bashing Mr. Neal in the sessions. She cannot control her emotions. She cannot focus on the issues. She has elaborated on, what she sees that Ms. Lee's issues are, and ultimately has agreed to come to the final hearing to testify. Essentially what she's told me, which, if we're just arguing our case, is that she believes that Miss Lee has histrionic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder or a combination of both. And her hate for Mr. Hightower is so strong that she cannot put the children first. She can't mentally do it. Miss Yaxall is talking, about me as a person, saying that I am not aligning with the right person, and I'm very confused by it because Ms. Yoxall and I have had conversations, very frank conversations. I'm not going to share those because I don't think it would be appropriate. But I think when you deal with Miss Lee, you know it's obvious. And my point with that is that the way that she has operated in this case, as you hear, she's paying for Dr. Davis because Davis aligns with her. And not even really. I mean, he doesn't say she should have primary custody and Mr. Hightower is toxic in any way, or that he's alienating. He doesn't say any of those things. He says, I suspect there's some talk over there that affects the children. But she likes what Dr. Lee says, and Dr. Lee adamantly disagrees with the state of the law as to children electing which mother knows. So okay, but the law is the law, and we're all sworn to abide by it. And so that's why he's paid. But Ansley, who has the most issues, right? Dr. Fritz told me, or Miss Fritz told me this morning that she's unpaid. So because Ms. Yoxall brought to my attention that Ms. Lee does not believe that Wendy Fritz is qualified to see Ansley, I communicated with Dr. Rodville, and
is Rodville the
general
practitioner, the
pediatrician,
medicine pediatrician? Yeah. Okay.
For years and years. And Mr. Hightower, I know, also communicated with him independently. And I communicated with Wendy and asked her whether she felt, because at that point, Miss Lee had gone to Miss Fritz, Wendy, all of her supervisors, had tried to get her removed, right? Had sort of not threatened her, but essentially, went over her head. Her Miss Fritz supervisors supported her. And when I had a conversation, I said, do you feel like you're connected with Ansley and you're making progress? Yes. Do you feel like you're qualified to handle the issues that Ansley has? Yes. I asked Ansley, do you want to continue to see Miss Fritz, and do you feel like she's helping you? Yes. And I think that short of this affidavit situation, everyone is in agreement that all of the things Ms. Yoxall mentioned about the things are about 2 years ago. I haven't heard that Ansley is cut recently. And the minute I walked into this case, she was sending nudes. She was 9 years old. So, what am I going to do about that? Right.
She was 9 when she started doing that?
I believe she was 9 and just turned 10 immediately afterwards. That was happening on both parents, and was always happening at both parents' home. One of the most, so one of the pictures that was being sent that I thought was very sexual, and she was clothed, she was sitting next to Miss Hightower in the car while she was taking the photo. So all of that, these are the people who I've spoken to. I've spoken to Ansley. I've seen the pictures. I had them all go to law enforcement. We got the phones. We had them completely download and investigate, and none of those photos had gone out, according to the law enforcement officers. So, I've done a lot. I know a lot. The pattern is there. Now I'm unethical and not in their best interest, and, unclean hands. You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
And that's all fine. I get it. I would do the same thing. But the point is, this issue it's getting worse. And Henry, right, is what really has just put it over the edge for me. And that is why I believe it's an emergency, in the sense that these children are, I think, feeling hopeless in their situation, because here I am asking them their opinion and assuring them that their voice would be heard by the court. And, we're in 2023, and, so that there is a sense of hopelessness there. It is affecting their long-term best interest in a way that I think is becoming worse and worse, if that makes sense. It's not an emergency like, defects needs to come in and.
No, I understand.
Thank
all
you.
right.
That's really all I
All right. Ms. Shoemaker, do you want to chime in on anything? I do have one question though. Tell me about this issue of the medication. Mom says dad didn't give him the medication. Dad says mom didn't give him the medication. Do both parents have the medicine available at their homes?
Your Honor, let me just say this, and just so you know, I have communicated with Bradley about the medication from a year and a half ago, maybe. I'd have to look at my notes. But he doesn't like it. He didn't like the way it made him feel. And he, he's now 18 plus. And so, at some point, I mean, I'm not, at what point do we let children say how their bodies feel, right? As they're approaching that. And so I am aware that he wasn't taking it, but
at either parent's home.
I think mom was kind of, I don't know how mom was doing at her house, like whether she was, she can make you do things, right? Like she will, as a parent, if you don't do this, I think that's legit. If you don't do this, you're gonna, whatever. I know dad wasn't making him take it. There's no doubt. Bradley said he didn't want to take it. And so, I don't, that's all I know about that. I don't know about the current situation.
Okay. All right, Ms. Shoemaker, anything you want to add?
Your Honor, and I'm happy to have my client testify about this, but I know that Miss Lee received Bradley's new medication, a new Keppra medication, on or about the 1st of April. On Our Family Wizard on April 14th, she told Mr. Hightower that Bradley needs to come to her house to get his medication, and that he needed to come by the 15th. On April 19th, Mr. Hightower texted Miss Lee saying, can you please just drop off his medication? And she refused, saying, no, you need to send him to my house so I can discuss his healthcare needs with him. And at that point, Mr. Hightower had run out of the medication at his house. He did not have any more medication for Bradley at his house. And on April 20th, again, through Our Family Wizard, Dad again asked mom to drop off Bradley's medication and not force him to have to go over to her house because he doesn't feel comfortable. And that at that point, Bradley did want to start on the new medication. That's, and my client can testify to that. And I also have the Our Family Wizard's messages if the court is inclined. And my concern is that I do agree with the guardian that this is an emergency. And the reason it's an emergency is because things just keep getting worse. And mom, has illustrated that she does not care what this court orders, and she's going to do what she wants to do, to the detriment of the children. The counseling for Ansley is very concerning, particularly if and it is, the guardian's right, it's hard to find the right fit, and we've got the right fit for a counselor, and mom has stopped taking Ansley to that counselor, has stopped paying the counselor. The only reason she's still going to the counselor is because dad takes Ansley, and Ansley's supposed to go every other week. So sometimes that falls on mom's week, and sometimes it falls on dad's week, just depending on the schedule. And mom will not take her on her weeks. In fact, the most recent one was, I believe it was April 12th, which was mom's week, and mom did not take Ansley.
Is there anything in Our Family? I'll give you a chance, Ms. Yoxel. Hold on. Is there anything in Our Family Wizard where mom's saying to dad, I'm not going to take her to see Wendy Fritz?
No, Your Honor, I do not know for sure, but I do know that
the reason being that
there were some text messages between mom and Miss Fritz. I think Miss Fritz actually shared with dad where mom said, I am not taking her.
Your Honor, for a while.
I just need to respond.
Well, you know what? Hold on. You will be able to respond.
I got to clarify. I'm just, because I have the timeline. Dad last minute scheduled an appointment during mom's time, which he's not supposed to do, on the 12th. Mom immediately rescheduled it to the 17th and took her. Okay. So nonsense. And there is in Our Family Wizard that discussion. Like, you can't tell me a couple hours before that there's an appointment on my time. Now, let me say something. Whenever mom makes appointments on dad's time, he will never agree to it. He will cancel it. He will complain to Dawn about the guardian about it. So she rescheduled it to a few days later. It is not true that she's not willing to take her. All she wants is a second opinion. This is not a travesty.
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Patty?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it wasn't a last minute, and I've actually, Ms. Fritz indicated that in the text messages that it's a standing appointment every other week. Every other Wednesday, it's a standing appointment. It's not
And why did mom, if it's a standing appointment every other week, why did mom have to change it? Ms. Yoxel?
I'm pulling the Our Family Wizard now so I can give you the exact information. Sorry, Judge. I didn't know that I was going to have to dispute this since it's not really in the motion.
Well, Your Honor, Your Honor, to be fair, Ms. Yoxel has brought up a ton of stuff that was not in the motion. And I'm just gonna, I'll be brief just because I think the Guardian did a good job of covering, what the issues are and the concerns are regarding the delay. My client specifically asked the Guardian not to file this motion right away because the children were in mom's custody, and he was very concerned about what was going to happen or what mom's response would be and what she would do to the children if the Guardian filed this motion while the children were in mom's custody.
Who has the kids now? Dad?
They're with dad.
Until when?
Yeah, I believe until I think next week they'll be back with mom.
Okay.
Monday. Your Honor, and I say that because early on in this case, and I believe this predates me, and I believe this was before the Guardian got involved. I'm not specifically sure. The two older children, Bradley and Henry, did sign affidavits to live primarily with dad. When those affidavits were filed with the court, mom sat the children down and had a conversation with them about their affidavits. And why.
Again, this is beyond an emergency and what's going on. This is from 3 years ago. And I'm sorry, it was after the case was filed. And that's why I felt that this doesn't need to be heard today. This is all information.
Well, I decided it needed to be heard today. So
You're on telling you my opinion. And now Ms. Shoemaker's bringing up stuff from 3 years ago.
Your Honor, I bring it up.
I would really appreciate it if you all let me just call on each of the parties. I always let everybody speak, probably more than I should, but the interrupting is one of my pet peeves. So, okay. Ms. Shoemaker, you may continue.
Yeah, I bring that up to explain why the delay, and it was because my client specifically asked the Guardian to not file this while the children were in mom's custody because of mom's prior conduct. We, in the fall, we had motions for contempt that we addressed with the court, and a senior judge heard those. So Your Honor may not be as familiar with Ms. Lee and the things that she's done in contravention of the court orders. And what we're seeing as we get closer to the final is just worse and worse and worse. The therapy, there was a motion to compel arbitration, which I know has nothing to do with this, but she's not following court orders. We scheduled arbitration 5 times and she still didn't show up.
And I remember, when this came up last time, I remember expressing some concerns, but I didn't feel at that point that it had risen to the level to warrant a change. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
But I expressly said I had some real concerns about mom's actions, which to me would be, if I were the mom in that situation, I'd be on my P's and Q's and I'd be dotting my I's and crossing my T's and making sure I didn't overstep an ounce, or a millimeter. So, okay. Anything else, Ms. Shoemaker?
No, Your Honor, I think that's sufficient.
Okay. Ms. Yoxel, anything else?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I do have the text messages. I see it's between Neil and Ms. Fritz, and this is on April 12th. Ms. Fritz says, just checking in on whether Ansley is coming to session tonight. And then Kelly, I believe it's Kelly, writes, no, she's not, as her father scheduled it on my time. I was only made aware less than 3 hours ago. You can bill him for the missed appointment. And she goes, it was not necessarily scheduled specifically for this week. I see Ansley every other week.
Yeah. How does mom not know that? If it's a standing appointment, it's not a situation of dad scheduling it on mom's time. It's always going to be on somebody's time.
And can I just say, if I could, if I can,
Yes.
that prior to the Ansley has anorexia theme from Miss Lee, Mr. Hightower, and I said and testified at the contempt that he was the one who was more likely to miss those appointments, and he wasn't missing all of them. He would just, whatever. If there was a missed appointment, I heard about it from Miss Lee, and he had missed it. And I think one time he forgot anyway. And so I've admonished him about it. So because it was a standing appointment, wasn't creeping up on anybody. But before it was Miss Lee, I mean, that was one of her main things that he misses the appointments. So it's
Okay.
you're assessing that correctly.
Okay. All right. Do y'all want to put up evidence? Do you want witnesses to testify, or you want me to decide this based on the arguments and everything I've heard?
I want you to decide it based on everything you've heard.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no objection to that.
Ms.
And
Yoxall?
Judge, I just would ask and request that, did you read my response and the attachments? Because that's what I would have been provided. And
Yes, I did, but let me do this. I'm going to take a quick break and I'm going to look at it again, given everything that I've heard, just to make sure I'm not missing something. So can y'all give me about 10 or 15 minutes?
Of course.
yes.
Okay, thank you so much.